Shalom. There are moments that we all experience during which, if we're reading something or studying something, that the words jump off the page because, for whatever reason, they appear to be so apt, so appropriate to the circumstances in which we find ourselves. They take on extra dimensions that perhaps they never did before. We have at least one such line in this week's Parsha, in this week's Torah portion, the one coming up, Yitro. Actually, not so much in the Torah itself, but in a comment by Rashi. At the beginning of the 19th chapter of Exodus, when Rashi says, when the Torah tells us how the Israelites arrived at the foot of Mount Sinai, the Torah says, "Vayisu mirfidim vayavo midbar Sinai vayachanu bamidbar vayichansham Yisrael neged ahar." That the Israelites left Refidim and they came to the wilderness of Sinai and they encamped in the wilderness, and Israel made camp at the foot of the mountain. Rashi notes the fact that much of this verse is totally, seemingly extraneous. First of all, he says, why do I need to know that they left Refidim and came to Sinai? At the end of Parshat B'Shalach, we learned that they're in Refidim. And so they had left Refidim and they came to Sinai. I don't need a map. It's obvious. It's not something that the Torah had to tell you. That they arrived at Sinai, okay, makes sense. They camped, okay, but why say that twice? That Israel camped at the foot of the mountain. What is that about? In other words, you could have had a much shorter verse, and the verse would have said, and the Israelites arrived in the wilderness of, they left the wilderness of Sinai, and they camped at the mount, and they camped at the foot of the mountain, or they camped in the wilderness, and goodbye. Why do you need more than that? So Rashi says, first of all, the reason why the departure from Refidim is mentioned as part of as the beginning point of the arrival at Sinai is to equate their departure from Refidim with their arrival at Sinai. What happened? Says Rashi, they left Refidim in the same state of mind as that in which they came to Sinai. And what was that state of mind? That state of mind was one of tshuva, of repentance, of return to God. I remember many, many years ago, it's almost 50 years, the Rabbi Soloveitchik, in a Saturday night lecture that he gave on Parshat Yitro, and this is the way that I'm about to tell you. Is not the way it's written up in any of the books that I've been able to find that record the teachings on the book of Exodus. Asked the audience, so what happened in Refidim? What happened in Refidim? So everybody said it was the battle with Amalek. Okay, who was Amalek? He asked. Everybody was quiet. Everybody was quiet. Well, that happened. We're always afraid to give the wrong answer to Rabbi Soloveitchik. He said Amalek was the embodiment of absolute evil. They were vicious. They were bestial. They attacked women and children and the elderly because they attacked the back of the camp. The weakest. They were cowardly. But they were nefarious, and they were absolute. Words don't express the evil that both they represented and the evil that they wreaked on the Israelites. Okay. That encounter with absolute evil, said Rabbi Soloveitchik, despite the fact that the Israelites under Joshua beat the Amalekites. The experience of encountering absolute evil perforce brought the Israelites to reach out to God, to hold on tight to God, to be contrite over their complaints. And it was that state of mind, the openness to God, that brought them into Sinai and open and ready to accept the Torah. When they arrived at Mount Sinai, Vayichansham Yisrael neged ahar, Israel encamped in front of the mountain. Rashi says, seemingly totally extraneous. So Rashi says, when they arrived at Sinai, contrary to all the other times that they left and they came and whatever, there was always arguments and fighting and disagreements and inner dissension. But they arrived at Sinai, ki ish echad belev echad, as one person, united with a common heart, common values, and common commitment. Apparently, the encounter with absolute evil, but the absolute evil of Amalek, not only brought them to God individually, but brought them together. And the Israelites discovered an underlying unity, which apparently they had never experienced before. I don't think I need to translate this into our contemporary situation. On October 7th, we here in Israel and all Jews, and we've discovered this as we've gone on, encountered absolute evil. Hamas and their thousands of helpers are the embodiment of evil. They are, as in every generation, there are those who will rise up to destroy us. The full embodiment of Jew hatred that has existed from day one. And the response of the Jewish people to our encounter with Hamas and all of those who help and aid and abet Hamas, directly or indirectly, has, thank God, been precisely what our ancestors felt and how they responded 3,000 or 3,500 years ago. Unity, determination, fighting back, and a return to an understanding of what it means to be a Jew. There has been an upsurge in expressions of Jewish solidarity and pride, and also return to Torah, to mitzvot. It certainly is patent here in Israel. Our encounter with Amalek, with our Amalek, with Hamas, Nazi Amalek, has caused Rashi's comment not just to be a comment about something that happened 3,200 or 3,500 years ago, but an expression of a permanent moment in what it means to be a Jew. The challenge is to maintain that, to recommit ourselves in a sort of new Matan Torah, to commit ourselves to that and to each other, and not to return to the standard operating procedure that Rashi requires. It says that all the other times they're always fighting and arguing and so on. Well, Jews will always argue and so on. But we have to always remember that behind and beyond and underneath all the disagreements which we've put aside, there still is that fundamental unity, fundamental devotion to Judaism, and fundamental, ultimately, reliance on God. Shabbat Shalom.